For years, the PlayStation 3 was the console that held. The Wii had fallen. The Xbox 360 had fallen. People chipped at the PS3 too, all through 2010, but its core defenses outlasted every rival it launched against. And when those defenses finally gave, on a stage in Berlin at the tail end of 2010, they gave in the most humiliating way possible. Not because anyone defeated its cryptography, but because Sony had done the single thing that cryptography absolutely forbids. In the signatures, a group of researchers pulled apart and lined up. Sony had reused a number it was supposed to use exactly once. It came down to a single number. The programs the PS3 agreed to run each carried a signature, a mathematical seal, that was supposed to prove Sony, and only Sony, had approved them. And buried inside the recipe for making one of those seals was a single secret value. Call it a one-time number. The math is blunt and non-negotiable. That value has to be freshly chosen for every single signature and then never used again. Reuse it even once across just 2 signatures, and you hand over the very secret that made the lock mean anything in the first place. Sony reused it, not in some obscure corner either. In the signed code, the researchers compared the one value that had to change never did, and a machine that had outlasted the entire hacking scene for the better part of 4 years unraveled from that one thread. To feel why that mattered, you have to remember how alone the PS3 was. By 2010, its rivals had been opened up one after another. The PlayStation 3 just would not go, the product of years of careful engineering. There's also one more thing worth knowing about this particular machine. From early on, Sony let you install Linux on it and run it as a real computer in a walled-off mode called Other OS. If you were the kind of person who wanted to run your own code, Sony had handed you a sanctioned place to do it, a room of your own, roped off from the parts that mattered. It was a genuine feature used in university courses and on research clusters. Then in 2010, Sony took that room away. A system update removed Other OS from machines people had already bought, closing the one official way to run your own software on them. Sony had its reasons, but to the people who had been happily working inside that sandbox, it landed as a door slammed in the face. One of the groups that would later walk onto the Berlin stage said plainly that this was the thing that turned their attention to the locks. The flaw was already there. The removal just changed who came looking for it. And the siege that followed ended at a hacker conference in Germany, where a handful of researchers stood up and very calmly explained that the fortress had been building its own gate wrong. Picture the seal itself. When Sony signs a program, it is really doing a piece of arithmetic with 2 ingredients. One is its private signing key, the crown jewel, the thing it can never let out of the building. The other is that one-time number, a fresh value chosen, just for the signature. Mix the 2 together the right way and out comes a seal anyone can check against Sony's public key, but that only Sony can produce because only Sony holds the private key. The genius of it is that the seal gives nothing away. Study a signed program all day, and you cannot work backward to the private key because that one-time number is in the mix scrambling the result, and it is different every time. Each signature is a different disguise over the same secret. That is a big part of what keeps the system safe. The disguise is doing the work, so picture what happens if the disguise stops changing. If that number is the same on 2 different signatures, then you have 2 different programs, sealed with 2 different results, but with the very same hidden value tucked inside both. And now, the disguise cancels out. Line the 2 up, and everything that was supposed to stay random subtracts away. And what falls out the other side is the one thing that was never meant to be reachable, the private key itself. No brute force, no supercomputer, just arithmetic. A careful student could follow, opened up entirely by a number that repeated where the math flatly forbids it. That is exactly what the researchers found when they pulled Sony's signatures apart and lined them up. The value was not one time at all. Across the signatures they compared, it was a constant, the same number, sitting inside one after another, like a safe manufacturer stamping the identical combination into every vault it sold, trusting that no 2 owners would ever set them side by side. Once you have seen it, you cannot unsee how ordinary the mistake is. Sony's cryptography was textbook. The algorithm was sound, is still sound today. The same family of math trusted to guard serious systems far beyond a game console. Nobody broke it. Someone just used it wrong, in the one specific way the textbooks put in bold with a warning next to it, and then shipped that mistake inside a console that had already sold into the tens of millions. With that signing key recovered, the whole idea the seal was built on quietly inverted. The point of the signature was that only Sony could make one. Now someone outside Sony could too. You could take your own program, your own operating system, your own homebrew, seal it so the signature checked out, and hand it to the console The machine would inspect that seal, find it mathematically perfect, and accept the code as properly signed. It was not tricked, and it was not tripped over. It was doing its job exactly as designed, checking for a valid Sony signature and finding one. The thing that had made a signature hard to forge was simply no longer a secret. Other locks still stood, later firmware, the network, the hardware itself all kept checks of their own, but this particular door now opened for anyone holding the key. And the reason it matters beyond one console is this. The cryptography itself was never broken. The researchers did not outmuscle the seal. They found that the secret behind it had been quietly spelling itself out, plain to anyone who thought to line the signatures up in a number the builders had promised to keep changing and never did. Strong locks rarely fail because someone is stronger. They fail because of how they were used. Sony did what you would expect. New firmware went out, which Sony described as a minor update that added a security patch. But a leaked secret is not something you can unleak. Once that key was known, it was known. The years after 2010 became a long, grinding back and forth. Sony hardened the machine, while a scene that now understood it far more deeply found new room to move. Some of what that opened up was exactly what the remove sandbox used to allow: homebrew, Linux. People running their own code on hardware they had bought. Some of it, Sony argued, was piracy. Though piracy roots had existed before any of this, a key that proves a signature is genuine does not ask what the person holding it means to do next. The same capability served both, and it could not tell them apart. This story is usually told as one big tangled event, and it is worth pulling the threads apart because they belong on different timelines, and getting them wrong is how you end up certain of things that are not true. The stage presentation, the reused number finding, was one group of researchers explaining a mathematical mistake. That is the story you just heard, and it stands entirely on its own. Then there is the lawsuit, which is a different thread. In early 2011, Sony went to court over PS3 hacking. The shorthand version, that Sony sued one lone hacker and branded him a criminal, gets both halves wrong. Sony's complaint centered on a well-known hacker who had published his own way into the machine, but it also named other researchers, including presenters from that Berlin talk. So it was never quite one man against a corporation, and it did not end in a verdict or a confession. A few months later, it quietly closed with a settlement. The best-known defendant agreed to stop, consented to an order saying so, and denied he had done anything wrong. That order was binding, a permanent injunction he agreed to live under, but it settled the fight without any court ruling on whether Sony was right. No finding of guilt was entered, and no one in it was convicted of a crime. And then there is the piece so often welded onto the story that never belonged on it at all. That spring, the PlayStation Network went dark for weeks after a massive intrusion that exposed the data behind millions of accounts. It is tempting to draw a straight line from the console hack to the network breach because they happened close together and hit the same company, but they were separate events, on separate systems, weeks apart. Who broke into the network was never established in the public record, and nothing in that record ties it to the signing mistake at all. The console's signature flaw did not open the network. Two very different Sony security stories landed in the same few months, and memory has been quietly stapling them together ever since. They are not the same wound. Strip it all away, and what you are left with is smaller and sharper than the headlines. The PlayStation 3 was not beaten by a genius, or a supercomputer, or a broken algorithm. It was beaten by a number that was supposed to be different every time, and in the signatures the researchers compared was the same every time. The math everyone trusted did exactly what it promised. What failed was the human step in front of it. The quiet assumption that a rule written in bold in every textbook would actually be honored once it reached the code. That is the uncomfortable part, and it did not stay on the PlayStation. The same class of mistake, a one-time number reused or carelessly generated, has surfaced since in other serious professionally built systems, because it is the kind of error that looks like nothing while you are typing it and looks like everything the moment two signatures sit side by side. A lock is only ever as good as the discipline of whoever holds the key. Sony held one of the strongest locks in the room for years. Then it wrote the secret on the wall, one signature at a time, and waited for someone to stand close enough to read it back.